Welcome to Friday Newsday, your #1 resource for the entire week's worth of VR news. And this is a good week. 4 pretty massive things have come to VR that I've been waiting a long time for. Xbox came to Quest, inside-out body tracking depth API, Meta's newest flagship game, and they're all actually pretty freaking awesome, except for one of them. But that's not it. This crazy VR prototype may be closer than it seems, and Meta's biggest competition has dropped out of the race. We got all that and so much more, but first, a word from this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Whether you're a game developer trying to showcase your latest title, a creator of virtual worlds putting together a portfolio, or you're just looking for a place to share your passion, you're gonna need a website, and Squarespace has your back. With a wide variety of customizable templates, intuitive design tools, and built-in mobile support, you can bring your vision to life in just minutes. And right now, you can start with a free trial at squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch your site, visit squarespace.com/Thrillseeker or use code Thrillseeker to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Really, creating your website has never been this easy, so give it a try. But now, back to the news. So, I figured we'd start out with something pretty exciting, and that's an update on probably Meta's most advanced public prototype headset. This is Mirror Lake, a device that holds some pretty amazing features, and I think I'm pretty safe in saying that this sort of hardware is really what's gonna push VR and AR to totally new levels. Because I think right now we've kind of reached this point where VR hardware has hit a threshold of diminishing returns. There's only so much resolution you can throw on a display to where you can't really tell that much of a difference, but Mirror Lake, however, introduces for the first time a few bits of technology that will change up the formula quite a bit with a few radical changes. And with this prototype, it's conceivable for the first time that varifocal lenses will ever make it to a consumer VR headset. And in case you don't know, varifocal lenses are quite a bit more important than you'd think. Right now, just about all VR headsets use either Fresnel or Pancake or aspheric lenses to refract the image from displays to your eyes. All of these lenses, however, are fixed to a single focal distance, meaning that VR will never quite look how reality looks. And that's where varifocal lenses come in. They've been researched for quite a few years now, all the way back to the old half-dome prototypes from 5 years ago, but Meta says they've reached a point where a device like this is actually feasible as a product in the next few years. These varifocal lenses actually allow you to focus on different things at different focal ranges. It's pretty cool. But these electronic varifocal lenses aren't the only thing that Mirror Lake holds. It's also packed with eye tracking, very Apple-esque reverse pass-through displays, a neural pass-through camera, not sure exactly what that is, but I think most excitingly is the inclusion of holographic lenses and a laser display on top of everything, mostly to bring the size and form factor of future headsets to be smaller than what we have today. And while before we only had Holocake and a few other prototypes to go off of, Mirror Lake seems to be what Meta is really striving for as the next standard of VR. And yeah, this is still pretty far off, like probably a few years at the minimum. You don't have to worry about your Quest 3 getting replaced by a Mirror Lake model anytime soon, but this stuff still gets me really excited. We've pretty much had the same core technology for VR for almost a decade now, and this wave of VR hardware is probably truly the next big shift in terms of how we use headsets and how usable they actually are. But now we can get into the actual good news that's relevant for VR users today. A couple weeks ago, V60 for Quest 2, 3, and Pro dropped, which was great, but in my opinion, the really exciting update came on the developer end with V60 of the Oculus SDK, officially bringing 2 features that I'm really excited about. The first one is Depth API. So if you've ever used the mixed reality mode on your Quest 2 or 3 or really any device, you'll notice that there's something really big missing, and that's occlusion of your hands. If your hands, for example, pass in front of virtual objects, the virtual object is still rendered in front of your hand, and that's kind of a small thing, but it's really a big thing in terms of making mixed reality, well, mix. And so far, the only device that we've seen that's really capable of occlusion like this is the Apple Vision Pro, but it's not even out yet, so there's no real true examples of what occluded mixed reality would feel like. I guess besides a few rendering tricks that people have accomplished before, but the new Depth API officially brings this new feature to the Quest 3. Using that shiny new depth sensor, programs can basically separate things by depth to figure out what should be rendered on top of what. And this was something that I was so excited about trying, but there aren't really any good examples of this in applications yet, so I just made my own, and while it's not perfect by any means, it's still really fun to play with. In the scene I made, you can see the virtual TV sitting on my real desk that that's occluded by both my hands and other real physical objects in my room, like my light. Or I can sit in a field of grass in my room or pet my cat in their natural habitat and have things move around them. It's really cool. And while there's still a lot of latency between the depth sensor information and the application, like moving quickly sort of breaks the illusion and the depth information is also pretty blocky. In the right setting though, it's actually quite the trippy experience to see virtual objects and real objects interact with each other, you know, how they're supposed to. Or at least mostly. And I'm not sure if any apps are going to take advantage of this, at least not anytime soon. It's still pretty early and the results aren't exactly super pretty, but it is really cool to see Meta finally taking advantage of that depth sensor, and I'm sure we're gonna see this rapidly improved upon. I mean, just look at Apple's mixed reality occlusion. Eek. But that wasn't the only huge thing that V60 SDK brought. We also finally got both upper inside-out body tracking and generative legs. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Meta having full inside-out body tracking, and I want to be clear, this isn't that, but it's a pretty good step forward compared to basically anything before it. The upper body inside-out tracking actually uses the downward-facing cameras and computer vision to accurately track points like your wrists and elbows and shoulders, and this is actual tracking, resulting in significantly better tracking, at least when it's used in applications. Beforehand, if you wanted your arms and elbows in a VR game, you'd have to just have a really good IK system, otherwise your arms just won't match with your virtual ones. And this does, for the most part, solve that. The lower body system, however, is not using computer vision and the tracking cameras to figure anything out about your legs. Instead, Meta is using a quote-unquote cutting-edge AI model to estimate your leg position. This, again, is better than anything before it, but at the end of the day, it is just estimation, meaning that it doesn't actually know where your legs are, so no crossing of your legs or hardcore dancing. However, standing and sitting will look and feel a lot more natural. And I realize there aren't many places to really try this stuff out since many apps aren't really using them yet, so if you do want to try both of these out for yourself, I made an APK that you could just sideload and you can touch some virtual grass. I'll make it available in my Discord server. It's nothing special, it's a little janky, but it's still fun. So yeah, go check that out if you're interested. But of course, on the non-development side of VR, two other pretty massive things dropped. One of them bad, at least right now, and one of them really good. So let's just start off with the good. Possibly the biggest native VR game ever made just released, and that's of course Asgard's Wrath 2. The game's been hyped for a long time now, or at least I guess sort of hyped, but its reception has been extremely positive. I mean, IGN gave it a 10 out of 10. The only other VR game to have received that rating was Half-Life Alyx, so I guess that's kind of a big deal if you care about what IGN has to say. The game promises a 60+ hour single-player campaign, has an extra roguelite mode, and after playing it a bit for myself, well, I gotta say, I'm personally really impressed that they managed to fit this game onto a standalone headset. The tutorial alone lasted for a couple hours and took me through quite a few different scenes. I'm not sure if that's a great thing or not, but all in all, I'd say it's pretty good. The game's fun, it looks pretty nice, especially for standalone. I mean, it feels a little bit like I'm playing a PS2 or early PS3 game, and I kinda doubt that I'll make it through 60 hours of it, but who knows? So far, I'm having a good time. It's still awesome to have a full 60-hour game available in VR that's actually a native VR game and not just a port. Although it does suck a little bit that it's only on Quest. I would have loved to see what a 4090 could make the game look like, but the game is made by a Meta-owned studio, so that makes total sense why it's not on Steam or anything. And I think it's a win for VR. It's maybe not the most engaging VR game of all time, but it's probably the fullest. Now, of course, the good must come with the bad, because while all of that was amazing news, there's still one thing that either Meta or Microsoft unfortunately just kind of dropped the ball on, and that's with the new Xbox Cloud gaming feature that recently came to Quest. Now, this was something that I also was really excited about, not really so much for myself, but for VR in general. The cool thing about a VR headset that's not really talked about enough is that it's not just for immersive VR games that require you to swing your arms around for a 60-hour campaign. It can also just simply be a massive screen for traditional media. And with something like Xbox Cloud gaming coming to Quest, it would make something like the Quest 3 a much better deal. You get a big TV and an Xbox with it. It sounds awesome. But unfortunately, the beta phase of Xbox Cloud streaming for Quest is still very much so in a beta phase. And I can kind of see why it's taken about 2 years after its original announcement to actually come. Various issues with controller pairing, problems with the input latency that isn't an issue on other Xbox Cloud streaming devices, and a specific issue with the Quest beta app is that it's just missing some inputs. And it's not because of latency, but some games just aren't receiving receiving inputs occasionally due to a few much deeper technical issues. And of course, all of that sucks. I mean, yeah, it's still in beta and I'm sure it'll improve over time, but for a feature that already works on tablets and phones really well, actually, I would have hoped that the rollout would have been a little smoother for the holiday season. And I seriously hope that it improves over time. I personally think that a feature like this would be one of the biggest selling points for VR headsets in general, at least to get people in the door to get a headset at all. And I'd hate to see a feature like this just collect dust. And it does work, just for now, the cloud streaming of Xbox games isn't quite a flawless experience. And with all of that honestly great meta news, unfortunately there's some bad news for other players in the industry and kind of the industry in general. The biggest foreseeable competition for Meta for the past few years has been Pico. They released the Pico 4 and Pico 4 Pro, posed essentially as a direct Quest 2 and Quest Pro competitor, and they made a really good headset. It's essentially a better Quest 2 without the Quest 2's library. And with rumors of a Pico 5 with incredible specs with early leaks, Pico's future looked pretty promising, and in general, competition for the industry is just massively beneficial for everyone, regardless if you're Team Oculus or Pico or none. However, it looks like Pico's parent company's recent cutbacks and layoffs have massively affected Pico themselves. Reports say that the Pico 5 has been canceled, as the Pico 4, quote, fell far short of ByteDance's expectations, end quote. This is likely especially true considering the Pico 4 is estimated to only have sold a small fraction compared to the Quest 2, and it didn't help that the Pico 4 was only sold in a small handful of countries. Apparently, a Pico 4 refresh is still on its way at some point, but as of now, Pico seems to be focusing entirely on not fighting the unwinnable battle that is competing with Meta, and is instead pivoting to fight the unwinnable battle that is competing with Apple with the high end of XR hardware, with a high-end headset, the Project Swan, being somewhere in development. And I don't know, it's kinda sad to see. Pico, while they didn't do quite as well as anyone hoped, really was the only competitor for Meta in sight. And well, but on that sad note, I do got one more really exciting thing to bring you back up. Fia and I are holding our yearly Christmas VRChat meetup, and of course, I wanted to say that you're all invited. It's one of my favorite events every year, and I've got my club Schism all decked out for the holidays, so if you want to come celebrate Christmas and the New Year with us, join in my Discord and you'll find all the details for the event. And I can't wait to see you there. But now it's time for question of the week from I Am Pancake. What are some great VR games that are lost to time? And I got 3 simple answers. The first one is Stress Level Zero's second game before Boneworks was even a thing, and it's absolutely worth a playthrough. Go get Duck Season, it's awesome. And on the Quest side of things, I've always been really fond of a game called Journey of the Gods. It's a very simple Legend of Zelda style RPG. It's not super long, but it's pretty fun. And finally, Stormland on the Oculus Store side of things. It's easily one of the best games out there, and it's completely forgotten about. All 3 of those are oldies but goodies, and most people don't know any of them, so yeah, go check them out. Alright, well, that was question of the week. Make sure to leave your own down below, and I may just answer yours next. And I wanted to thank my Patreon supporters so much for making this video possible. And of course, don't forget to like this video if you loved it, subscribe if you want more of this, and hit that freaking bell if you just can't live without it. Happy holidays, I hope you have an amazing one. Much love, Thrill out.